My name is John Birdsall. I'm going to be your moderator today on a discussion of the issue of criminal justice reform in the United States and Wisconsin in particular, with an emphasis on reducing mass incarceration in Wisconsin. I have been a criminal defense lawyer for 31 years and have served on a variety of Wisconsin reform boards and reform efforts. I've also been in the trenches during most of the tough on crime and war on drugs era, having tried over 270 jury trials to verdict, mainly serious felonies. With that, I'd like to start with what the problem is and how we got here with Professor Michael O'Hare. Professor O'Hare is a nationally recognized authority on criminal punishment. He teaches criminal law and related courses and has co-authored more than 75 scholarly articles, books, and book chapters on sentencing, criminal procedures, and other legal topics. He's a graduate of Yale College and Yale Law School. He joined the Marquette University Law School faculty in 2000. There's nobody better to set the stage than Professor O'Hare.
Yes, as John indicated, I'd like to share some of the background with you on what mass incarceration looks like in Wisconsin. You can see the overall historical trend lines here. The blue line on top is the number of prisoners in the Wisconsin prison system. In the 1960s, really throughout the decade and into the early 1970s, Wisconsin had a very consistent prison population of about 2,500 inmates. And then beginning in the mid-1970s and continuing for 30 years unbroken, the prison population in Wisconsin steadily grew and grew and grew. And for the past 15 years or so, we've been in a period of relative stability in comparison with that 30-year explosive growth in imprisonment. Now, I always like to think about prisoners as, in a sense, the output of the criminal court system, or an important output of the criminal court system. And I think it's instructive to view the number of prisoners in relation to a key input into the system, which is the orange line you see on the graph. That's the number of arrests for major violent crimes in the state of Wisconsin. And if you take a look at that line, you see that for the first half or so of the imprisonment boom up to about 1990, the number of prisoners was growing right along with the number of major violent arrests in the state. So that provides a pretty straightforward explanation for why the prison population was growing through that time period. But then in the 1990s, something really striking happens. As you see, the two lines diverge. The number of violent arrests in the state stabilized, while the prison population just continued to grow and grow and grow for another 15 years. Now, that's pretty strong evidence that the system was functioning differently and functioning more harshly. So similar inputs, but the outputs look very, very different. Now, mass incarceration has become a significant topic of political debate and public policy discussion. And you can see two of the major reasons why this has become such a concern in recent years. Number one, cost. So nationally, in constant dollars, you can see we've gone from $20 billion in corrections in 1980 to more than 4 times that in more recent years. But money is only part of the story. Mass incarceration has also been very controversial because certain members of our national and state community have borne the costs of mass incarceration to a much greater extent than others. The human costs here, not the fiscal costs, the human costs of mass incarceration. You can see nationally that the Black share of the prison population is much greater than the Black share of the overall population. And that disparity is even significantly greater in the state of Wisconsin, with about 7% of our state population, general population, being African American, and over 40% of the prison population.
Next, we have Professor Keith Finley to talk about how mass incarceration intersects with the problems inherent in the structure of the criminal justice system. Professor Finley was a former public defender who now is a faculty member at the University of Wisconsin Law School, where he has taught in the law school's clinics for 20 years. He specializes in evidence, wrongful convictions, criminal procedure, and law and forensic science. In 1998, he co-founded the Wisconsin Innocence Project. He has authored more than 50 law review articles and book chapters and has litigated hundreds of post-conviction and appellate cases throughout the United States, including in the United States Supreme Court.
One window into this is to simply look at the number of cases in which a DNA evidence has been used to exonerate a wrongly convicted person. And we know of at least now 375 such cases throughout the country since 1989. And these are almost all rapes and murders, the most serious kinds of crimes. The individual served on average 14 years in prison before exoneration. 21 of these people had actually been sentenced to death. We know, however, that this is a gross undercounting of the problem of wrongful convictions, because this is only looking to those cases where DNA evidence has proved innocence. And so I want to suggest in my brief moments here that not only does the problem of wrongful convictions help to some small extent explain the problem of mass incarceration, but it is also the innocence movement is arising at a point in time when it may be converging with other factors to create a rare moment of opportunity for reform of the criminal justice system. Coming together at the same time is this awareness of the problem of wrongful convictions and about the need for reform that it creates. At the same time, we have this new awareness and concern that Professor O'Hare has so clearly articulated for us about mass incarceration, about how our system has sort of gone crazy by international standards in terms of rates of incarceration, and has done so in a way that crosses ideological and political boundaries, in part because of the recognition that we simply can't afford to incarcerate at the rates we have, and the recognition that such mass incarceration isn't really solving the problems of crime anyway. And then a third factor, is, which I've sort of used Black Lives Matter as a shorthand for that, but this growing awareness that the system treats Black people systematically unfairly. These three things coming together all create pressures and incentives and opportunities for reform like we have never seen in recent memory. I can't end without identifying that there is in fact an overlay of race in so many of these cases, that there are racial disparities, not just in incarceration rates, but we see them repeatedly in exoneration rates as well. Wrongful convictions disproportionately affect members of racial minorities.
Our next speaker is Attorney Jarrett Adams. Jarrett Adams was wrongfully convicted of sexual assault at age 17 and sentenced to 28 years in a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. After serving nearly 10 of those years and filing multiple appeals, he was exonerated with the assistance of the Wisconsin Innocence Project. After being released from prison, he went on to graduate from the Loyola University Chicago School of Law in May of 2015, and later joined the Innocence Project's litigation department as the department's first post-conviction litigation fellow in 2016. Jarrett's been licensed to practice law in Wisconsin in 2020 and will become co-counsel in our statewide criminal defense firm of Birdsall, O'Bear and Associates. His upcoming book detailing his harrowing experiences in Wisconsin's criminal justice system, entitled Justice for Sale, A Wrongful Conviction, A Broken System, and One Lawyer's Fight for the Truth, will be published in April 2021.
Thank you. And thank you guys for having an opportunity to be a part of this panel. I'll quickly go through my slides and tell my story. You know, I don't have a story of being a kid who was in the streets and a gangbanger who turned his life around. I was actually out of trouble, you know, me and my three friends. And in fact, you know, here's a photo of me. You're talking about 2 months before I was charged and ultimately wrongfully convicted. This is me at high school, graduating 17 years old. And very shortly after, me and a couple friends decided to tell our parents we were spending a night over each other's house. We snuck up to an all-night party at Wisconsin, and this picture quickly turned into this picture. Never given the presumption of innocence at all. A case that involved, nothing more than an accusation, and there was some evidence that was withheld from the defense, which ultimately led to my wrongful conviction and my co-defendants. And it took a lot of litigation on behalf of the Wisconsin Innocence Project to go to what was almost the final stage of relief. My conviction was reversed in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, unanimous decision. But after that, there was only a request for a hearing en banc, or to request that the Supreme Court hear it. And if we hadn't gotten relief at that stage, I shake to think that I still would be in there up until 2020, February of this year, which was my mandatory release. I got sentenced to serve 28 years in prison, 18 turning 19. I made it into Walpond Correctional Facility. I spent several years there and then was transferred to Green Bay Correctional Facility. I had the assistance of an inmate who pointed out several different factors in my case that went wrong. And I was able to, from that conversation and doing research on my own, put together enough writings and enough of a draft of a habeas, to get the help of the Wisconsin Innocence Project. I realized just how fortunate and lucky I am, considering that, we have a swell of population of inmates, men, and increasingly women who are reaching out in need of pro bono services. A lot of the correlation of race and, these convictions and a disproportionate effect of African Americans that you have incarcerated in Wisconsin, it comes down to having resources. A number of people, including myself, can't afford attorneys at the initial stages. That plays a factor, along with being able to get bond and a number of other things. That plays a huge factor into the outcome of a lot of these cases. 1998, I'm incarcerated. I don't get out. I don't get relief until February of 2007. And there was an opportunity for the prosecutor very early on, once there was a realization that there was a witness statement that was never turned over that undermined the entire case. There was an opportunity for the prosecutor to use his discretion and grant us a new trial. He instead refused to do so, and it caused us on an almost 9-year track to appeal and ultimately get relief. I say this all the time. Although my conviction was reversed and my record was ultimately expunged, the damage that it did to my life and my family's life was never reversed. It can never be expunged. I had a difficult time transitioning. I obtained the support of my family and sought therapy and immediately rolled into school. I ended up graduating with my associate's degree, my bachelor's degree, and then ultimately with my law degree from Loyola. I didn't want to stop there. I realized that in order to have the true effect on chipping away at the stigmas that are attached racially, definitely for those who go in front of all white juries, and just the belief of the public that cases aren't won and lost strictly on race, I wanted to become more of a part of this conversation. So I decided to go $100-something thousand in debt and obtain a law degree from Loyola Law School. In doing that, I've had a remarkable journey. I graduated law school, and once I graduated law school, I was able to do a dual fellowship clerkship inside the Seventh Circuit in the Southern District of New York, which led me to the Innocence Project and ultimately led me to this table next to Keith Finley when we did the Baranek case. I want to spend a little time before I go on what I really do believe the problem is and offer a solution. I think the main problem that we have is the financial aspect of prisons and the items that are sold in prisons, the prison phone calls, where there is a debt and a payment owed from taxpayers in terms of funding these facilities. Someone's making a profit out here. And I believe that that is perpetuating the lock them up, throw away the key, truth in sentencing, because I think we can all agree at this point that over incarceration does not make the public safe at all. it just creates more of a cycle when you lock people up for decades, release them, and then tell them, you do what you're supposed to do without any resources to help them reintegrate back into society. So I look at the correlation of this prison boom when we saw the spike go almost, triple what we had. And I look at this and I find that there's also a correlation between the private prison profits, but there are also a number of other companies that you can see were founded at and around the time of this spike. That's not a coincidence. It deserves exploration, if nothing more, so we can find out the true answer and find out who's behind this profit in prison boom. I think it's important. I think it's important for us to understand that some people's 401ks and different stocks are right in prison. And if that's the case, we are unknowingly supporting a problem that is draining our society. I look at this number as an illustration. Within 3 years of release, 67.8% of ex-offenders are rearrested. Within 5 years, 76%. This is a national number. Now, just imagine if we had a car company and on average, 67% of the cars came back because there was a problem. And then 5 years later, 76% of those cars came back. We would have a national debate to shut down this car company. Why haven't we had a national debate about the effects that we're having on the human lives that are taking the toll of this? You look more at numbers. Look at the pie chart. You see a pie chart, 2017 pie chart of the budget that we're spending. We are spending $2 billion a year annually, but look at where most of the money is going. The money isn't going to the corrections part of it. It's going to prison operations, AKA lock them up, build more prisons. Look at the amount that's going to the mental health care aspect. Look at the amount that's going to reentry. Those are the issues that we have with being able to put a dent in this. If we do not focus our conversation on the reentry and the mental health care aspect and on the tools to help people reintegrate, we're doing nothing more but what the slide that Professor O'Hara showed us earlier. We have 50% of people who are currently incarcerated in Wisconsin, they've been there before. That means that it's not indicative of who these people are. It's indicative of the system not correcting. The system is warehousing. And with that, I'll close.
And thank you to Michael O'Hare, Keith Finley, Jared Adams, also for their incredible contributions. Jared, in particular, for your inspiring story. It's really, it's one of those things that just really stops you in your tracks and makes you think. So, and thank you to the One Wisconsin for this great conference. And hopefully this conference and this discussion will help those who feel alienated from society to know that they have a place and a voice. So if you have any questions for any of our speakers, don't hesitate to reach out to them or to me. And of course, make your voice heard in the legislature if you want to dismantle this deeply discriminatory criminal justice system we have in Wisconsin.